Come home now. Hurry. A frantic text from Thomas flashed across my phone as I was finishing my shift at the hospital. Ada. Thomas. What on earth could have happened? My heart raced as I sped home, dread tightening around my chest with each passing minute. The door was slightly open when I arrived, an eerie silence hanging in the air. My body froze at the horrific scene before me, my daughter Ada and husband Thomas lying motionless on our living room floor. I rushed to their sides, my medical training kicking in as I desperately checked for vital signs. Nothing. Near them lay a rope and what appeared to be a suicide note. My hands trembled violently as I picked up the folded paper, my vision blurring as I read its contents. This can't be real. Thomas took Ada's life. And then his own. The police investigation concluded quickly, accepting the note's story without question. They called it murder-suicide. That's impossible, I whispered, my voice breaking. Thomas would never harm Ada. As I stood there, lost in grief and disbelief, an unexpected visitor arrived. What they revealed shook me to my core. I immediately contacted the police, begging them to reopen the case. Days later, 2 officers appeared at my door with solemn expressions. Mrs. Bennett, we were wrong, one officer said, unable to meet my eyes. It wasn't a murder-suicide. As the truth unfolded, my emotions crashed through me like violent waves against a shore. Mom, I'm home. Ada's cheerful voice filled our house as she burst through the front door after school. 2 of her classmates trailed behind her, backpacks slung over their shoulders. Hi Mrs. Bennett, a boy called out confidently. Thanks for having us, a girl added more politely. Connor. Madeline. Welcome to our home, I smiled, recognizing Ada's new friends. Connor is the outgoing type who loves video games, while Madeline is studious and conscientious. They'd formed an inseparable trio these past few weeks. The children quickly disappeared into Ada's room, their laughter and excited voices drifting through the house. In the kitchen, I arranged some pound cake I picked up from the bakery near the train station. It was on sale, just $1.52 for the whole loaf. For a moment, I felt a twinge of inadequacy thinking about serving it. Ada's elementary school catered to the elite. Our neighborhood was filled with tech executives and successful entrepreneurs who'd chosen this area for its excellent schools. Thomas and I only managed to build our home here because his cousin sold us the land at a family discount. The first parent-teacher conference had been eye-opening. Designer outfits, luxury handbags, and conversations about European vacations and Michelin-starred restaurants made me shrink into my department store clothes. I'd never felt so out of place. Their children, naturally, wore expensive clothes and possessed sophisticated tastes beyond their years. I hesitated with my humble offering but reminded myself that children don't need extravagance. Squaring my shoulders, I knocked on Ada's door and entered with the plate of cake. Snack time, I announced. The children's faces lit up. Awesome. Thanks Mrs. B. Connor exclaimed, reaching eagerly. Thank you very much, Madeline said with perfect manners. Thanks, Mom, Ada smiled appreciatively. I was thinking how innocent children can be when Connor suddenly remarked. This is that cheap pound cake from the station bakery, right? The $1.52 one. My smile froze. You have quite the discerning taste, Connor, I managed to reply. They make a $6 cheesecake that's way better, he continued without missing a beat. The more expensive it gets, the better it tastes. Is your family on a budget, Ada? Ada's expression fell, her eyes darting uncertainly between Connor and me. Before I could respond, Madeline intervened. Connor. That's really rude. Whatever, he shrugged. My parents hired a famous pastry chef last weekend for my dad's birthday. I retreated from the room, unsettled by the interaction but noticing how Ada and Madeline still seemed impressed by Connor's boasting. That evening when Thomas returned home, Ada chatted excitedly over dinner. Connor's amazing at Minecraft. I beat Madeline today but I can't beat him. Is that so? I responded, trying to sound casual. Connor's comments about money lingered in my mind, but Ada seemed unfazed. I remembered seeing his mother at school, draped in designer clothes, eyeing my outfit with barely concealed contempt. The Prestons are old money, the kind of family where children learn brand names before nursery rhymes. To them, store-bought pound cake might as well be cardboard. Thomas remained blissfully oblivious to these social dynamics. "I'm happy you've made such good friends," he said, his eyes crinkling with genuine warmth. "They're the best." Ada beamed. "School is so much more fun since we became friends." We sat together, basking in this simple family moment. How could I have known our peaceful life was on the edge of a knife? Something wasn't right. Ada had grown increasingly withdrawn over the past weeks. Her appetite had disappeared, and she'd spend hours alone in her room. No more bursting into the kitchen after school announcing her hunger or sharing stories about her day. Instead, she'd slip quietly upstairs, her room's door clicking shut immediately after. My maternal instinct sensed trouble. After my hospital shift, I stopped by Ada's favorite bakery and picked up chocolate muffins, her weakness. "Ada, honey. I brought us a treat." I called, opening her door without thinking. "Mom. Don't come in." Ada cried out, something falling from her hands. "I'm sorry. I should have knocked," I apologized, bending to retrieve the dropped item. My heart stopped. A pregnancy test with an unmistakable positive result lay in my trembling hand. "What is this?" My voice barely audible. "Ada, please tell me what's going on." Ada's face was drained of color. "That's..." She started, then fell silent, eyes fixed on the floor. I cycled through questions, pleas, and frustrated demands, but Ada remained silent. She only confirmed that the test result was hers. My mind reeled with disbelief. Yes, Ada had started menstruating earlier this year, but she was only 11, still my little girl. Who could have done this to her? Was she forced to do it? The thought made me physically ill. Despite my persistence, Ada wouldn't speak, eventually dissolving into tears. I mechanically finished preparing dinner, my thoughts churning with awful possibilities. When Thomas came home, we ate in tense silence. "I'm going to bed," Ada mumbled, barely touching her food before fleeing upstairs. "Ada, we need to talk about this." I called after her, but she was gone. Thomas looked between us, concern etching his features. "What's happened?" he asked quietly. With a heavy sigh, I told him everything. His face went through shock, denial, then anger. "There must be some mistake," he insisted desperately. "I saw the test result with my own myself, Thomas," I replied, my voice breaking. "And Ada confirmed it was hers." His fist slammed the table. "She's 11 years old." He shouted, anguish in his voice. "Who would do this to her?" I remembered a school email warning about a suspicious person. "You don't think..." I couldn't finish the thought. Thomas nodded grimly. "It would explain why she won't talk," he said. "We need to take her to a doctor tomorrow, then the police." The room seemed to spin around me. How had our ordinary life shattered so completely? The following day was Saturday. We'd have the whole day to get Ada help and find whoever did this. We had a plan. We thought we were prepared. But we had no idea what awaited us. Saturday morning arrived with heavy anticipation. I was preparing to talk with Ada after breakfast when my phone buzzed insistently. "Hello? Dr. Sharma?" "Yes, I understand." It was the hospital administrator explaining an urgent insurance coding crisis. Our small medical office was understaffed, just the doctor, his wife, a full-time office manager, and 2 part-timers including myself. "We need you to come in immediately," he insisted. "But..." I hesitated, torn between responsibilities. "Just until noon," he promised. "The system needs to be fixed before Monday's appointments." I reluctantly agreed, explaining the situation to Thomas. "I'll talk with Ada," he assured me. "We'll wait for you to get back before going anywhere." The promised noon deadline stretched to 1 o'clock, then 2 o'clock, then 3 o'clock. I sent text messages to Thomas but they somehow went unanswered. Anxiety gnawed at me as I finally broke free and rushed home. "Thomas? Ada? I'm back." I called, stepping inside. Silence. The house felt wrong, too still, too quiet. I hurried to the living room and froze. Thomas and Ada lay motionless on the floor. Ada. Thomas. I screamed, dropping to my knees beside them. My fingers desperately searched for pulses that weren't there. A rope and a typed note lay nearby. My hands shook violently as I read, "I can't live with what I've done to Ada. I'm taking us both away from this shame. I'm sorry." The room spun around me. Thomas? My Thomas did this to Ada? It couldn't be real. I somehow managed to call 911, my voice distant and unfamiliar to my own ears. The paramedics confirmed what I already knew, they were gone. The police arrived, clinical and detached as they processed the scene. They took me to the station where I answered endless questions through a fog of shock. Yes, Ada was adopted. Yes, she was pregnant. Yes, we were planning to go to the police today. Hours later, a detective with thinning hair and a condescending smile leaned forward. Your husband panicked, he stated flatly. Hospital tests would have revealed him as the father. Something snapped inside me. My husband would never hurt Ada. I shouted. There's been a terrible mistake. The detective shook his head with practiced sympathy. These cases are more common than you'd think, he said. And given that she wasn't his biological daughter, perhaps that was even the reason for the adoption. I felt physically struck by his words. How dare you? I hissed through tears. We loved Ada. We would never. I understand this is difficult to accept, he interrupted with that same pitying expression. But men can have sides they never show their wives. I wanted to defend Thomas, to scream his innocence, but my voice failed me. Grief and rage had drained me completely. The police deemed it a murder-suicide based solely on that damning note. My protests fell on deaf ears. No further investigation, no questioning, nothing. The case was closed. The funeral services passed in a blur of unreality. My parents handled arrangements while I moved through days in a fog of disbelief. Ada's classmates came, Madeline crying openly while Connor stood awkwardly beside his parents. Thomas's co-workers attended, their faces masks of sympathy and unspoken judgment. Through the hushed conversations, I caught fragments that cut like glass. It's always the quiet ones who have those tendencies. Taking advantage of an adopted child. Can you imagine what that poor woman is going through? I wanted to scream the truth. Thomas would never hurt Ada. Someone else did this. Something was terribly wrong. But I remained silent, too broken to fight. The days after merged together in a haze of sleepless nights and uneaten meals. My ordinary life had shattered, leaving me hollow. I stopped answering calls, checking emails, or opening the door. Time simply passed, meaningless and empty. The doorbell chimed through my empty house nearly 2 weeks after the funeral. I considered ignoring it like all the others, but something compelled me to answer. Madeline and her mother Catherine stood on my porch, the girl's eyes red and swollen from crying. Mrs. Bennett, Madeline's voice broke before she could finish. Come in, I managed, my smile feeling foreign on my face as I led them to the living room. Madeline clutched a small notebook to her chest, tears streaming down her cheeks. Ada, I miss you so much, she whispered as if my daughter might hear her. We were supposed to have our sleepover next weekend. Her innocent grief pierced through my numbness. Suddenly, Madeline began sobbing harder, her thin shoulders shaking with the force of it. It's my fault, she cried. I'm so sorry. Confusion cut through my fog. Your fault? What do you mean? Madeline looked up at her mother, unable to continue. Catherine White placed a protective arm around her daughter. Madeline told me something important, she said quietly. Something about Ada and Connor. What followed was a revelation that shook me to my core. I sat in stunned silence as the pieces fell into horrifying place. I should have told Ada to stay away from him, Madeline whispered. If I had warned her. Thank you for your courage, I said, my mind racing with implications. We need to take this to the police immediately, Catherine insisted. I laughed bitterly. They won't listen. They've already closed the case. Catherine's expression hardened. I'm the city's legal counsel, she said firmly. And my brother is a detective lieutenant downtown. We'll get this case reopened. Please, Madeline begged, grabbing my hand. Ada and Mr. Bennett deserve the truth. For the first time since finding their bodies, I felt something break through my despair. Okay, I said, my voice stronger than it had been in weeks. Catherine accompanied me to the police station 3 days later. The same detective who had dismissed me before barely glanced up from his desk. Mrs. Bennett, I've already explained that we consider this case closed. I placed the folder Catherine had prepared on his desk. My daughter got pregnant because of her classmate Connor Preston, I stated firmly. Not because of my husband. The detective sighed with exaggerated patience. Mrs. Bennett, grief can make us deny difficult truths. The suicide note was quite clear. That note was forged, I insisted. Please reopen the investigation. We have real crimes to solve, he replied dismissively. I don't have time for this. Catherine stepped forward, her professional demeanor unmistakable. Detective Parker, I've already discussed this case with Lieutenant White. I believe you know him, he's my brother. The detective's face was drained of color. Lieutenant White? I wasn't aware you were, please excuse me for a moment. He hurried from the room, returning minutes later with his superior. Mrs. Bennett, the senior officer said with newfound respect. We'll be reopening your case immediately. A full forensic team will reinvestigate the scene. The power of connections was undeniable. I felt a surge of vindication mixed with disgust at the corruption within the very system of justice. A week later, 2 officers arrived at my home wearing solemn expressions. Mrs. Bennett, the female detective began. We owe you an apology. This wasn't a murder-suicide. Your husband and daughter were murdered by someone else. My legs felt weak as relief and horror collided within me. I knew it, I whispered. The detective continued, her voice gentle but professional. We've conducted a thorough reinvestigation. We've analyzed security footage from neighbors' doorbell cameras. And found trace evidence that was overlooked. The Prestons' vehicle was captured on 3 separate cameras near your home that day. Victoria and Richard Preston, Connor's parents, murdered your family. Connor had gotten Ada pregnant. This was the devastating revelation Madeline shared that day. It had begun months earlier when Connor, exposed to explicit content online, became fixated on sexual experimentation. He asked me to play grown-up games first, Madeline explained between sobs. I didn't really understand, but something felt wrong. She had refused, keeping the uncomfortable interaction secret. Rejected by Madeline, Connor had turned his attention to Ada. Ada always wants to make everyone happy, Madeline whispered. She wouldn't know how to say no to him. I should have warned her. I should have told someone. Madeline's guilt had reached a breaking point at the funeral when she overheard whispers blaming Thomas. That night, she finally confessed everything to her mother. Connor's parents must have found out, Catherine had theorized to me that day. For a family like the Prestons, with their connections, this would be devastating. Her theory proved horrifyingly accurate. The police investigation revealed the calculated nature of the crime. Ada, confused by her changing body, had confided in Connor. Connor told his parents, Victoria and Richard Preston. The prestigious Preston family, with their old money and social standing, couldn't weather such a scandal. Their 11-year-old son impregnating a classmate would destroy their carefully cultivated image. They initially planned to lure Ada away alone that Saturday. But Thomas had discovered Ada's secret that morning after I left. Ada had broken down and told him everything. Together, they went to confront the Prestons. This unexpected development forced Victoria and Richard to improvise. They murdered Thomas and Ada, then staged the scene in our living room. The forged suicide note was typed to avoid handwriting analysis. They wore gloves, leaving no fingerprints. The initial police investigation was deliberately superficial. In our affluent suburb, police officers routinely protected the wealthy. Without status or connections, my grief was easily dismissed. Had it not been for Catherine's influence, the truth would have remained buried. The reopened investigation discovered doorbell camera footage showing the Prestons' Audi at our house. A neighbor reported seeing them enter our home that afternoon. Forensic teams found Ada's clothing fibers in the Prestons' home and Thomas's shoe prints on their doorstep. When confronted with this evidence, Victoria and Richard had no choice but to confess their crime. They had murdered my family to protect their social standing. Thomas's name was finally cleared, offering a small mercy amid overwhelming tragedy. A decade has passed since I lost my family. I've built a new life in Seattle, far from the manicured lawns and calculated social hierarchies of our old neighborhood. I couldn't bear to remain where every street corner held memories of Thomas and Ada. More than that, I grew to despise the hollow values that had cost them their lives, the obsession with status and appearances that turned two parents into killers. I found purpose in founding Voices for Justice, an advocacy group for families of violent crime victims. We provide support groups, legal resources, and a platform for those silenced by tragedy. My nursing background serves me well as I help others navigate the landscape of trauma and grief. My closest ally in this work is Madeline. She's now finishing her master's in trauma counseling at the university here. When she was accepted into the program, she reached out to me, and our shared history created a powerful bond. For years, Madeline carried the weight of guilt for not warning Ada about Connor. "You were just a child yourself," I've reminded her countless times. The Prestons bear all responsibility for what happened. Slowly, she's learned to forgive herself, channeling her pain into helping others. Our organization has gained national recognition recently. I've testified before Congress on victims' rights legislation, appeared on news programs, and written articles for major publications. The work keeps me focused, gives meaning to days that might otherwise collapse under the weight of what I've lost. Sometimes I catch myself imagining the life we might have had, Thomas growing silver at the temples, Ada blossoming into a young woman with her father's gentle spirit and quiet strength. These moments still bring tears, but they no longer paralyze me. Instead, they fuel my determination to create something meaningful from such senseless loss. Every family I help becomes part of Thomas and Ada's legacy. Every person who finds their voice through our work carries a piece of their memory forward. I've learned that moving forward doesn't mean leaving them behind. They're with me in every act of compassion, every battle for justice, every moment of connection with those who understand such profound loss. This is how I honor them, not just by remembering, but by living with purpose. I hope they would always be proud of me.